Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you a brand new trap that I've never seen before coming out of the London opening for the white pieces. The moves that black plays to get themselves into these tricky positions are pretty natural and very common at the amateur level, and even if your opponent doesn't end up falling for the trap, you're still going to have a nice position out of the opening. So of course the London system starts with d4. If our opponent plays d5, move order doesn't matter too much at the beginning, but the hallmark of the London is bringing this bishop out to the f4 square, slicing through this diagonal. Black typically continues by developing a knight. We can also develop a knight or reinforce this bishop, of course building out this eventual pawn pyramid that we want. And now a very common move at all levels is the copycat variation, where black brings their bishop out to f5. We can continue with normal development, getting our knight to f3. And now a pretty inaccurate move that we're going to take advantage of in this trap is the move knight to c6 by black. Now, you'll see this a lot at the amateur levels, and typically when you're looking for good traps in the London system for white, they're going to stem out of positions where black has played the move c5 before developing this knight. But personally, as I've been studying the London for several years now, I've never really seen higher level players talk about what happens if that pawn doesn't come forward, and you see it so much at the amateur levels. I know it's inaccurate, and I was trying to find a way to quickly take advantage of it. And the reason it's so inaccurate is that you actually want this pawn in front of your knight so that it can quickly strike at the center, and it just creates a lot more opportunities for dynamic play for black, meaning that their queen will be able to get in and their pieces will just have a little more space to play with. Now, the idea that players with black are typically going after is kind of a fried liver-esque idea, where they have this bishop aimed at the c2 square and they actually want to move their knight to have a double attack on this square and fork our king and our rook. That is kind of the ooga booga plan that a lot of players want to go for. We can take a solid approach to preventing this plan entirely by continuing to build out our pawn pyramid with a move like c3, but the aggressive move that's going to start these series of traps that we're going to be looking at in this video is developing our bishop out to b5. Now, this is immediately putting pressure on black's position, and also because it's pinning the knight to black's king, that means that it's also preventing that knight, similar to if we'd played the move c3, it's preventing black's knight from coming down and trying to fork us on c2. And now if we had a few moves in a row, we would want to bring our knight up to e5, and if we had another move in a row, we would capture this knight. If black captures back, we would want to take with our bishop, forking the king and the rook. So black wants to prevent this from happening. So the best move for black in this position is a pretty unnatural one, dropping the bishop back to d7 just to defuse that pin. But a lot of times your opponents are not going to want to move a piece twice. They know their opening principles and they don't want to retreat their bishop when it's already on this really nice diagonal just sitting there on the f5 square. Another good move for black is doing the same thing but with the knights, dropping their knight back. This also looks pretty unnatural because, of course, we can capture and double black's pawns. Now, if your opponent does drop the knight back to d7, I wouldn't recommend capturing that knight because it's very early in the game. We want to keep two bishops on the board. We don't just want to move out our bishop and just give it up for the knight for no reason. And the double pawns are not a good enough reason to give up that knight. But again, this backwards knight move is also pretty unnatural. You're going to already win material if black plays the very solid, obvious looking move e6. We're going to jump our knight onto e5, and because the knight is pinned, and because this pawn is now moved and black can no longer bring the bishop back to defuse the pin, we're going to at least be winning a pawn here. Now, I should show you the best case scenario, which is what happens if black does nothing. So a move just trying to develop their other bishop. Now we're going to capture with the knight, of course attacking the queen, so black should probably do something about this. If b takes, then we will capture with the bishop, and like I said earlier, we have this very nice fork with the bishop against the king and the rook. So this is the best case scenario. There's also ways, though, that we will just be winning a pawn. So in this position, a move like a6 is pretty common, and in fact is the best move for black to get some compensation for this position. And here we're also just going to take with the knight. Don't worry about our bishop. taking with the knight, again, immediately attacking the queen. So black needs to do something about this knight before capturing the bishop. If black just captures the bishop, okay, we take the queen. And again, if the b pawn takes, then we're going to have this fork once again with the bishop against the king and the rook. So actually back here, the best move for black is queen to d7, putting the queen sort of in harm's way and not recapturing the piece that they've just lost. Now, if your opponent finds this, no need to worry. We're still at the very least going to win a pawn here, and there are some very fun lines that are coming up out of this position. So here, we're going to win the pawn. Okay, we have our two minor pieces hanging. Might as well give one of them up for an extra pawn because we're going to lose at least one of them. Let's capture that pawn on a6. Now, if black wants to hold their pawn structure together and chooses to capture with the rook, now we're going to fork the rook and the queen, and of course we're going to be already up material. Also, quickly going back to this position, if the queen takes the knight in this position, we simply retreat our bishop, try and trade it off for black's really strong light scored bishop, and we're going to be just fine. Obviously, we're already up a pawn, and our position is great. We don't get the very exciting traps that we're going to see in just a bit, but being up a pawn isn't too bad. So instead, in this position, black has to capture with the pawn, and now we very simply just retreat the knight back to its really nice square on e5, again attacking the queen, so the queen has to move, and queen b5 is best here, preventing castling and also staring down at this b pawn, but this is where the trap starts to get very exciting. We're not even going to worry about our b pawn that's hanging. We are going to play the move c4. Why are we playing this move? We want to get the queen away from this diagonal because we want to bring our queen in and give checks. Our knight is so close that it's going to be very tricky for black to hang on to the game if we manage to get that check in. If black takes this pawn with the pawn, we're simply going to castle. We've given the pawn back, but we get very quick development with tempo, and our king is already to safety. Black has to be really accurate in order to prevent their queen from just getting chased all over the board. So more commonly what you're going to see is black taking here on b2, seeing that that rook is all alone in the corner and trying to go up a pawn that way by immediately attacking the rook. We don't care about our rook. The queen has moved away from the protection of the a4 square, so now we bring our queen in with check on a4, and if the knight just blocks the check, we're going to have checkmate because our knight's also looking at that square, so that's no good. The king has to move here, and king d8 is the best option. And now for the fun part, we just castle. We don't care about our rook in the corner. We have so many pieces. Black's king is out in the middle of nowhere, and we are going to very quickly win this game. Of course, it's worth noting in this position that we do have this knight fork you may have spotted on f7, forking the king and the rook, winning the rook back that we're about to lose in the corner, but it's actually more worth it to leave this rook trapped in its own corner and use our knight for some better possibilities that we will see. So let's see what happens if black cashes in and grabs that rook. Now, the whole reason that we can't give a checkmate right now on d7, defended of course by the knight, is that black's knight is also looking at that square. So we just need to basically get rid of that knight in order to make this checkmate threat an actual reality. How can we do that? Bishop to g5. We're threatening to take the knight and then give checkmate, and we're also just pinning this knight to the king. So at this exact moment, we are threatening checkmate if black doesn't do something about it. If black simply tries to escape with their queen, now we just have checkmate because this knight can't capture our queen. It's pinned to the king. So that's a very pretty one. And back here, if black just tries to defuse this pin, seeing that that checkmate threat is a possibility, we're just going to take the knight. Black can't capture back because, again, they're just getting checkmated because that knight is not covering the very important d7 square. So what is black's best move here after we have pinned this knight? Well, it's actually just to move the king out of the way of the pin. King to c8 is the only viable move in this position. Again, just getting out of the way of this bishop. And yes, we are down a rook here, but this is so much better for white. It's +3 in this position, even though we're down 5 points of material, just because black's king is so out in the open and our pieces are so active. So here, just to show a really pretty line, we can capture, and the best move for black actually isn't to capture back, because if they do, it's checkmate in 5 moves. We go queen e8 check, king has to move, we check again, defended by the knight, King has to move to b8 to defend this rook, just to hold on to their position as long as possible, but it's still a mate in 3. Bring the knight up for check. King goes here. We can check like this. The pawn is pinned, and wherever the king goes here, we have checkmate on d7. And if the king goes back to protect the rook, we just take the rook with our queen defended again by the knight, and there's nowhere for the king to escape. So that queen and that knight combination working together are going to win you a lot of games, even being down the entire rook. So that's checkmate on move 19. Of course, pretty unlikely that you will get these exact lines in your games, but going all the way back to this initial position where we just played the aggressive move, bishop to b5, you can see how these lines can stem from this move if black goes wrong with just playing a few natural moves. We're at the very least going to be winning a pawn, and I would encourage you to play around with these types of positions, experiment based on what you're getting out of your games, and you will start to see some very fun lines that stem, again, from these positions after bishop to b5. I hope this gave you some fun, aggressive, trappy ideas against this early knight to c6 move that we see a lot at the amateur levels. Let me know if you want to see any more videos like this in the comments below, and also let me know if you have any wins in these positions that you learned out of this video. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.